The Extraordinary Rendition of Janos Farkas. Chapter 47. It was impossible not to be intimate. Their room in Beirut was barely bigger than the bed, which was barely bigger than a single, and the darkness was not dark enough to cloak her form. He hesitated, watching her clothes fall from her, while the last of his own clung to his body. How could he do it, he who had no right? She was a pawn, an innocent player in a game she had not chosen. A woman who had entered into a relationship where the relationship had no path, no future. The last of his clothes fell, and he slipped into bed beside her, determined to keep apart, determined to keep the touch of skin from becoming lust. But the bed was too small, too close, and even if it were not, it would not have mattered because she turned towards him, her hands feeling, her mouth searching, the passion of newlywed love. Spencer shuddered. "I don't know," he said. It's been so long. The prison, I don't know, maybe not just yet." "Just hold me," she replied. "Just hold me like you've never held me before." He held her tightly, not daring to think about what was there, what was in his arms, what was in front of him. He squeezed thoughts from his mind and talked about far Philistin, about the night he spent in the grave, stretching it into the several nights of the other Janos. He talked coarse and hard about the food and the retching and the diarrhea and the rats, vulgar and crude in the details, using the foulness to keep his mind at bay, to keep the moment away. But even through all this wretchedness, he knew he could not put the moment off forever. Laying with him was not just a woman of beauty, but a woman who was supposed to be his wife, a woman he was supposed to lust after, to desire, to want, a woman who any man who had been deprived of her for several days would want to devour. He closed his eyes and swallowed hard. It was she who came to his rescue. "Why have we come to Beirut?" she asked. "What part of you have you not told me about?" If he had been frightened of the intimacy of body, he was even more frightened of the intimacy of mind. How far had Janos gone with her? What had he told her? How much had they shared? The physical act of love could be played out naturally, but what else they had shared between them was something only they would know, and in the direction of this path lay danger for Spencer. He brushed her lips with his, probing, touching, feeling, no longer willing the moment away, but urging it on, pushing the truth to somewhere else. It was strange to her, this new role she was playing, and what should have been a moment of anticipation now became a moment of questioning. Berlin had been easy. Berlin had been as scripted as a thin romance novel. You meet by chance, you date, you make love, you fall in love, you become inseparable, all in a whirlwind of passion. Berlin was her game. She was the instigator, the protagonist. Only the marriage had been Janos's idea, and even without that, she knew the game had been hers. But Berlin had happened too fast. She had not been given the time to find out the plan or the scenario, and now Berlin was gone, and the storyline was unclear. In the darkness, she could smell his sweat. It was not the sweetness of a lover's sweat, but different, more harsh, acrid, and somehow unfamiliar. Everything seemed unfamiliar now. The trip from Damascus up into the mountains, past the billboards of the Syrian royal family, had not been what she would have thought. Janos had a hesitation about him, small words to his sister, even less to Turk. He sat beside her and put his hand on her thigh, and then moved it down to her knee, away from her closeness. Just before the border, Nabil Abu Zuri turned the gas off the highway and drove up into the mountains, parking out of sight behind some scrub bush and a giant billboard. The two Palestinians in Syrian uniforms went to check the border crossing. Everyone else got out and waited. The sun had not crested the peaks yet, and the blue shadows were cold. Janos took her head in his hands and kissed her, but only on the forehead. It was an hour before one of the Palestinians came back. He had nothing to report, although he didn't know if there actually was nothing, or just no visible signs of a search for an escaped prisoner. His friend had gone to mix with the border guards and find out which way the truth lay. Turk reminded them that Alice Murray had told them the Syrians might be embarrassed and try and hush it up, particularly in front of the members of the League of Arab States meeting in Beirut. The sun was high in the sky by the time the other Palestinian came back. The guards he had met knew of nothing unusual happening. He had waited, bribing them with cigarettes to see if anything changed. It hadn't. Alice Murray must have been right. Even so, Nabil Abu Zuri decided to wait for some Syrian military vehicles to come along and cross as if they were part of the convoy. It was late afternoon before that happened. The border crossing was without incident, and soon they were in the land of billboards for McDonald's, Starbucks, and the Hollywood blockbuster movies that drew taxi after taxi full of the Syrian middle class on day trips to Beirut. Just over the border, they pulled over to the side and watched the convoy disappear ahead of them. With the aid of his Uzi, Nabil waved over an old Volkswagen van. The reluctant driver accepted Ayn, Gisela, Turk, and Janos as passengers to the bus depot in Beirut. There they took a taxi to the address Alice Murray had given Turk. The old woman who lived there greeted them, fed them, and, in honor of their recent marriage, gave Ayn and Janos her bedroom, which was the only one in the house, and the bed they were in now. She reached for his body, searching and caressing it. His aloofness was not something she could explain, and she wanted to use her womanhood to draw him back to her. She wanted to find out what she had not found out in Berlin. She wanted to find out the plot, the plan, so she could craft her role and play her part. His reluctance gave her the chance for the small talk she needed. "Why have we come to Beirut?" she asked. "What part have you not told me about?" And before she could ask, "The prison. There was truth to the prison, wasn't there?" He had his hands on hers, finding the secrets that took her voice away. When his breath started to quicken, and hers, she pulled at him, running her hands up and down his back. Her moment of passion snapped like a dried wishbone. There was no pea-sized scar. She felt again and again, searching and rubbing, as if it were ardor, but there was no scar, no remnant of a bullet hole. "My art is up here," he had said, holding her hand to his chest. "Janos," she whispered. "Oh, my Janos, what have they done to you?" That's the end of chapter 47.